Some days are more significant than others. I don't know if you can remember your first day of school. Maybe some of the kids, can you remember your first day of school? Increasingly, I can't remember much about my first day of school. But I think for parents, it feels like a big day. When your kids are suddenly away, everything changes, routine is different. It's a change. It's a significant day. Wedding days are significant days. We had our chippy and quiz night as a church last night up in the community hall just up the road. And Alan stood up and said a few words. And he mentioned his wedding. And it occurred to me, last time I was in that hall was on the day of Tammy and Alan's wedding. Right? Great day. Big day. Day when two became one. It's a significant day. The births of children are significant days. If you've been there, you're never going to forget it. It's a big day. Life-changing. These are significant days. Today's a significant day for a different reason. Amy is going to get baptized today. She has spent some time going through baptism classes. She's kind of had a date set that she's known about. She's been waiting for it, maybe a little bit nervously. Amy? And the day has now come. And for her, I'm sure, this will be, and it's supposed to be, a memorable day. These are significant days. But what I want to say to you this morning from this little section of God's words is that the whole story of the Bible and the whole of human history, from the very first day right up until today, has been moving and building and heading towards one most significant day. One day that will come suddenly and certainly. The day is called in the Bible the day of the Lord. It's a day that's fixed, that's been fixed from all eternity. And it's a day on which the Jesus who lived sinlessly in this world and who died for sinners on that cross and who was buried in the tomb but who rose on that first Easter Sunday, that day is the day when that Jesus, who's been in heaven ever since he left this earth, will come back. That day, Jesus will come back. Now, I seem to say the same thing to my wife every single Easter. It's just kind of crept up on me. I don't know if you're anything like this. There's been a whole load of build-up. The date's been fixed. It's in the calendar. We know it's coming. And yet suddenly it's here, and I don't really feel ready. Is that just me? I'm like that with Easter, birthdays, Christmas, anniversaries now as well. It's here. It's suddenly upon us. The truth from this passage that comes to us this morning is that Jesus is coming, certainly and suddenly. And when he does, he will judge the living and the dead. And if you spent this life that you've lived kind of occupying yourself with all sorts of other things other than him, if you've just kind of filled your life up with busyness and maybe some selfishness and maybe some self-righteousness and maybe just a sense of obliviousness, just kind of living a life ignoring the God who made you, and if you've never considered and been captured by and been changed by those events of that very first Easter, and if you've refused to recognize that time is ticking away and that one day, that day will come, then that day, the day of the Lord, will be a day of judgment and a day of condemnation for you. And maybe God's goodness and kindness and patience to you today is in making crystal clear that that day is coming. And then offering to you the freedom and the forgiveness that is found in the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. If you are trusting in him, then what a day that will be. And what I want to do this morning is tell you 3 sudden and certain consequences for the Christian of that day when the Jesus who rose on the first Easter Sunday comes again. Okay? Here's the first one. A day is coming when in a flash we will be changed by him. If you've got the passage in front of you, do you see what Paul calls these readers at the start and the end of this section? Verse 50 and verse 58. He calls them brothers and sisters. These are people that Paul's writing to who have become part of God's family through faith in Jesus Christ. So these are people who have been kind of knitted together with Jesus in his life. They've been joined to him in his death. And they've been united to him in his resurrection in such a way and to such an extent that they've actually become part of his family. They've not earned it. It's not deserved in any way. And yet able to call God Father. Now, for children of this family of faith, there is waiting for us, if you're part of that family, an inheritance. The inheritance is this: life that will last forever, in a world that will last forever, with God who lasts forever. Now, what's the problem with that inheritance? Here's the problem. This body's not going to last forever. This body that I currently have is a body that is corrupted by sin. It's a body that can't enter into a world untouched by sin. This is a perishable body that cannot inherit the imperishable. This is a mortal body that cannot inherit the immortal. Do you see? Some of the family of faith died a very long time ago. Their bodies were put into the ground. Their bodies have decayed away into nothing more than dust. Their problem is plain. But if Jesus came today, here's my problem. This living body won't last. And so Paul says in this chapter 15 of 1 Corinthians, the dead will be raised, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in a moment, he says, in a split second of transformation, everyone who has ever trusted in Jesus, from all of time and from all over the world, will be in one singular moment, men and women, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, changed. One simultaneous instant of transformation. The family of faith, and that you can have a look around the room, weak as we are, and perishing as we are, and unimpressive as we are, will one day be made fit to inherit the imperishable. And so here's what I want to urge you in this morning. If you are a Christian, if you've believed in Jesus, but if his return feels very long in coming, you ever feel that? If the kind of build up to his coming has begun to break down your confidence in his gospel, and if the longer this body lingers, the less likely it feels that it will ever be any different. Straight from verse 58. This is my urge. Dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Stand firm in the faith, in those things of first importance. He really died for you. He really did. He really was buried. He really did rise, imperishable and immortal, that first Easter Sunday, just as God promised he would. He really is alive, and he really is coming again. You believe that? And on that day, we will all, in a flash, be changed. Here's the second thing. A day is coming when in the twinkling of an eye, we will be victorious through him. Here's the good news at Easter Sunday. Jesus has won. Jesus has won. He has died for our sin, but death couldn't hold him. And the work that was finished on the cross paid for our sin. And as he rose resurrected, the victory over death itself was secure. His victory as the sinless one. And yet our victory as those who have had their sin paid for. And so, here's the truth. Here's the truth today for us. Death is disarmed. It has lost its sting, Paul says. No sin, no sting. It is blunted. Jesus has carried away all of our condemnation, and all that death can now do is draw us closer to our God. Sin remains in us, but it doesn't reign in us. Death can wound us, but it can't win. Death is still sore, but its sting has had its sharpness rubbed away. And the death that once loomed over us as a kind of tyrant has become to the Christian a servant. And we can say to death, "Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting?" And death has no reply. Death has become stingless and voiceless. And today, death is defeated. But there is a day coming when in the twinkling of an eye, just as fast as you can blink, I don't think there's many things we can do quicker than that, just as fast as you can blink, death won't just be defeated, it will be swallowed up in victory. Not just neutralized, but no more. Once the bodies of believers have been changed into imperishable, immortal bodies, suddenly death will die. And if you're here today and your experience of life feels like despondency, and feels like despair, and feels like kind of looming defeat under the shadow of death, then you need to know that that last enemy that looks like it has a hold on the whole of humanity, it could not hold him. And so it cannot hold you. And death won't just be stingless and voiceless on that day. It will be no less than swallowed up in victory. And so let me encourage you today, the gospel really is good news to dying men, women and children. The command in verse 58 is, let nothing move you. I want to say to you, let nothing move you from this message. The message that the sin sting of death has been dealt with on the cross. And the message that the defeat of death has been displayed in the resurrection. And the message that death itself will one day die when in the twinkling of an eye, death is swallowed up in victory. Let nothing move you from this message. Here's why. This message is the only hope for a dying world. 3. A day is coming when at the last trumpet we will be alive with him. If you're not familiar with the Bible, the sound of a trumpet in these verses is just going to be a little bit weird to you. For these first readers, hearing from Paul that a trumpet is going to sound is going to take them right back to the first half of the Bible that they knew. The sound of the trumpet would be the sound of the end. The Bible made clear the sound of the trumpet would mean the last battle cry. It would be the warning of imminent judgment. It would be the announcement of the Lord's arrival. And it would be the gathering call to God's people from all four corners of the earth to come. There will be a sound that summons together the living and the dead. It will be a call that goes out to corpses and skeletons and bodies that have deteriorated away to dust to come, to gather, transformed, victorious, alive before Jesus. And the long labour of this life and the kind of incubation of the grave at that moment will be over. And the trumpet blast that sounds will be like a kind of first cry of a new humanity. It will be the sound that ends the painful labours of this life and then gives birth to imperishable life with Christ on that day. And so if you're here today and you're feeling kind of dragged down by the daily toil of this life, and if you are facing that uphill struggle of suffering and sorrow and struggle, then here's the enduring truth to aid your endurance. Life follows labour. That's been the truth in this chapter, hasn't it? Life follows labour. And so here's the instruction, verse 58 again. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, Paul says. Make every effort to encourage each other to stand firm in the faith. Make every effort. Throw yourself into the work of making this immovable message known to a world of dying people. People still enslaved by the sin sting of death. If Jesus is alive, and if that trumpet sound hasn't sounded yet, then Jesus still has work to do in this world. And he wants to do it through you. Give yourself to the work of the Lord. It's the last word I want to say this morning. I want to finish with the last word of this passage. Do you see what it is? Vain. Vain is a word that means pointless, meaningless, purposeless. And maybe you're here today and you actually think everything we're doing this morning is just exactly that. Maybe you're here this morning and actually you think that word kind of sums up my life. Pointless, meaningless, purposeless. To tell you the truth, Christians sometimes think that way too. And I think sometimes in the kind of long pangs of labour, when we haven't yet been birthed into that imperishable life that is to come, it can start to feel at times like pointless pain. Vain. And so whether you're a Christian or not this morning, if you are feeling that the labour of this life is just exactly that, vain, then what I want you to do this morning is see what we're going to do. And see in the baptism that takes place a clear picture of the life and the death and the burial and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Not an idea, not a kind of philosophy, not a theory, not a technique to be perfected, not a ladder to be climbed. See the truth of what happened just as God promised it would. And then see the testimony of a person trusting in those truths while living and longing for the day when in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the sound of the last trumpet, there will be no doubt whatsoever that our faith and our message and our labour are not in vain. Easter Sunday is a really good day for a baptism. It's a good day for a baptism because both Easter Sunday and a baptism are brimming with anticipation for that day when Jesus comes again and in a flash the family of faith are made changed by him, victorious through him, and alive with him. Amen? Amen.